Part 1. It began quietly, as many of the most consequential stories often do. A few scattered reports, whispers online, unconfirmed statements from insiders. Yet behind this apparent calm was a storm building in Russia's digital and military landscape, a project that was meant to modernize, secure, and simplify one of the most secretive systems in the country had just collapsed from within. And the reason, as it turns out, was not an external invasion, but a digital one. For several years, the Russian government had been working tirelessly to automate the country's military registration process. The goal was clear: no more chaos during mobilization, no more missing records, no more loopholes. A fully electronic draft registry, the Unified Register of Military Records, was meant to bring order to the system. Instead, it exposed a web of secrecy, inefficiency, and internal vulnerability that few could have imagined. The company behind this vast digital infrastructure, MyCord, was based in Kazan. Once a modest regional IT firm, it had become deeply embedded in state technology projects, from local databases to federal information systems. By 2024, MyCord was entrusted with helping to build the electronic draft registry, a system that would one day determine who among Russia's millions of citizens could be summoned to serve. Its clients included the Ministry of Defense and major state telecommunications giants like Rostelecom. On paper, this was a symbol of technological progress. In reality, it became a symbol of just how fragile Russia's digital fortress truly was. Then came the night of December 5th. Employees of MyCord gathered in a Kazan bar, unaware that within hours their company would effectively cease to exist. Hackers had infiltrated and destroyed the firm's entire digital infrastructure: servers, backups, internal documentation, everything. Websites, code repositories, and even social media accounts were seized. And it wasn't just an act of vandalism. The attackers had uncovered what the Russian government had been quietly building: a system capable of managing nationwide mobilization in a matter of clicks. When the hackers published their first statement, panic spread among employees. Messages circulated: "Nothing works. Everything's gone." Within hours, the firm's director, Ramil Gabdurakhmanov, convened an emergency meeting. His words were grim. "They've wiped everything. Our infrastructure is gone. All that remains are the local source codes on your computers." The damage was total, and yet the implications were only beginning to unfold. As journalists began to dig deeper, what they discovered inside the leaked data was staggering. Over 100 gigabytes of internal documentation, emails, and technical plans revealed how the registry was being built and for what purpose. The system wasn't merely a digital archive. It was a powerful surveillance tool, connecting dozens of state databases, capable of identifying, locating, and even restricting the movement of millions of Russian citizens in real time. The hackers passed these materials to a human rights group, Go Forest, which then provided them to independent journalists from important stories. These reporters pored over the data, spoke with engineers, government contractors, and cybersecurity experts, and verified the authenticity of what they found. Their findings painted a chilling picture of a project that was never simply about modernization, but control. Yet in this first stage, one must pause, because what is at stake here isn't just a database or another government project gone wrong. It's something far more profound: a window into how power is structured, how fear is managed, and how digital tools are being weaponized, not only in wars abroad, but against the very citizens they claim to protect. If you're watching this report now, remember, this is just the beginning. Before we uncover the full extent of the hack, the secrets it revealed, and the stunning connections between the company, the Ministry of Defense, and Russia's most powerful agencies, take a moment to subscribe, like, and comment below. It helps this investigation reach more people and ensures these stories don't disappear into silence. Because the next chapter will take us inside the walls of MyCord, where the real machinery of the Russian state's digital mobilization was built and then destroyed. Now we move closer to the heart of this story, where technology, politics, and secrecy intertwine in ways that even its creators couldn't fully control. Part 2. The story of MyCord's downfall begins years before the December breach, in the quiet corridors of Russian bureaucracy where technology meets power. Founded in 2007 by Alexander Nikolaev, an ambitious entrepreneur from Kazan, MyCord started as a small regional IT company, building custom systems for local government offices. Over time, it became a trusted subcontractor for digital transformation projects, developing information systems for state agencies across Tatarstan. Its reputation for reliability and discretion soon opened doors to much larger contracts, including those tied directly to Russia's federal ministries. The turning point came when Nikolaev's firm secured a contract to develop the Unified Registry of Civil Acts, a database integrating birth, marriage, and death records across the country. That project established MyCord as a dependable partner for sensitive state systems. But its true rise began after 2012, when the company deepened its connections with Nikolai Nikiforov, then Minister of Communications and a key figure in Russia's digital expansion strategy. Nikolaev's business links with Nikiforov's family proved instrumental. When Rostelecom, the state telecom monopoly, became the backbone of Russia's digital governance initiatives, MyCord's name was already on the shortlist of trusted partners. By 2024, MyCord was drawn into one of the Kremlin's most ambitious and secretive undertakings, the Unified Register of Military Records, or ERVU. The contract itself wasn't publicly listed, but leaked documents show that MyCord was brought in through a subsidiary of Rostelecom called RT System Communications, RTSK. The project's goal was clear: to digitize and centralize all data concerning citizens' military obligations, allowing authorities to issue electronic draft notices instantly, track compliance, and enforce restrictions on travel or employment for those avoiding service. Within government circles, ERVU was described as a milestone in digital sovereignty. Internally, however, it was a chaotic experiment riddled with corruption, incompetence, and mounting ethical questions. The technical documents obtained from MyCord show that their developers were responsible for several key components: the personal portal where citizens could view their draft notices, an analytical dashboard for military officials, including one designed specifically for generals, and a hidden subsystem for special services, enabling them to modify or erase entries in the registry. That last module was known as the Unified Conjugation Component, EKS. Its purpose, according to official language, was to synchronize sensitive data across secured subsystems. In reality, it allowed intelligence and security agencies, the FSB, SVR, and FSO, to invisibly alter or delete any record, including those of individuals they wished to protect from mobilization. Changes left no digital trace. Even the logs showing data removal were automatically erased. In government terminology, this was referred to as compromise-free processing. This design was no accident. Internal chats reveal that the requirement came directly from the Ministry of Defense's main Organizational Mobilization Directorate, GOMU, and was personally approved by its head, Andrei Beryukov, whose wife, Yulia Levitskaya, oversaw the ERVU project from the government side. Levitskaya was described by colleagues as both influential and pragmatic, ensuring that the system met political expectations. Publicly, she told journalists the register had no connection to war and would simplify citizens' lives by eliminating unnecessary bureaucracy. Yet, in internal correspondence from May 2024, she gave very different instructions. The system must support scenarios for mobilization, contract service, and volunteer enlistment. We must display potential recruits by categories. The documents show that by mid-2024, ERVU could identify millions of potential recruits by age, health status, and even family structure. It categorized citizens based on their suitability for immediate conscription, contract service, or reserve duty. The General's Dashboard, as it was known, could display data on men between 30 and 50, or women between 30 and 45, cross-referenced with information on dependents, education, and medical exemptions. If a person had fewer than 5 children under 16, their exemption was automatically flagged as reviewable. The system could theoretically generate and issue over 1 million draft notices per year, fully integrated with Gosuslugi, the Russian e-government portal. Yet, despite its sophistication on paper, the reality inside McCord was starkly different. Developers worked under immense pressure for modest pay, often less than 60,000 rubles a month. Deadlines were brutal, communication with government supervisors was constant, and technical mistakes were common. Employees routinely ignored security protocols, shared passwords, and stored confidential files in unsecured messengers. In July 2024, managers reminded staff not to share internal credentials, yet by November, nearly all team members were doing exactly that. The hackers who later infiltrated McCord exploited these very weaknesses. The cyberattack, according to the group claiming responsibility, was made possible by outdated infrastructure and negligence. McCord's VPN gateway had expired firewall licenses, a result of Western sanctions that blocked software renewals. Their servers ran unpatched versions of Windows 10 long past their support period. Within days, the attackers breached the perimeter, escalated privileges, and gained control of the company's entire network. More than 80 servers and 12 terabytes of backups were wiped. In one night, MyCord's operational backbone vanished, and with it, years of confidential communications between the firm, Rostelecom, and the Ministry of Defense. The internal panic that followed is captured vividly in chat logs and video call transcripts. On December 8th, during a tense video meeting, Director Ramil Gabdarakhmanov admitted to employees that everything is gone. He urged developers to check if they still had copies of the source code on local machines, promising that we'll rebuild from whatever we can salvage. But privately, he knew that the company's reputation, and possibly its contracts, were irreparably damaged. Within the same week, Rostelecom and RTSK suspended MyCord's access to joint infrastructure. The project froze. Independent technical experts who reviewed the leaked materials confirmed that MyCord's code quality was poor, lacking sufficient testing and documentation. Much of the system was built on a proprietary low-code platform called WebBPM, a framework that accelerated development but sacrificed security and transparency. According to one analyst, the ERVU isn't a single unified system. It's a patchwork of incompatible modules stitched together by contractors who barely communicate. This chaos extended all the way to the top. Government meetings on the registry's progress were reportedly tense. Minutes from one session show that Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin, Defense Minister Andrei Belousov, and Digital Development Minister Maksut Shadayev reviewed the project personally. Presentations were repeatedly delayed, errors in the dashboard were ridiculed, and at one point, the developers were told bluntly, "You're not ready to show this to the president's administration." Levitskaya's internal messages confirmed that the General's Dashboard was even tested in a government bunker near the White House in Moscow, where officials demanded real-time visibility of draft progress per military commissariat. Inside McCord, exhaustion reached a breaking point. Developers were sent to the Ministry of Defense's facilities on Frunzenskaya Embankment in Moscow to conduct live demonstrations and fix bugs under military supervision. One of them, Ruslan Gazdinov, became a reluctant symbol of this burnout. In chats, he complained of sleepless nights, endless revisions, and visits to secure data centers lasting past midnight. His supervisor promised him bonuses after the dashboard is accepted, but those never came. When he finally requested a salary increase to 135,000 rubles, his manager responded only with sympathy. She too hadn't slept properly in 3 months. Yet beneath the fatigue and routine despair, something far more disturbing was at play. These employees, tired, underpaid, and demoralized, were the ones maintaining the infrastructure of digital mobilization. Their code would decide who could cross the border, who would receive a draft notice, who would lose access to employment or financial services for noncompliance. In chat rooms, some of them joked darkly about their work, calling it dirty, the system of fear, or simply the machine. When drones struck a region where one of their colleagues lived, discussion of the war was immediately shut down by management. Politics was forbidden. They were told to focus on deliverables. By early 2025, McCord was a shell of its former self. Staff turnover was rampant. One internal survey asked employees to share phrases they associated with the company. The most common response? "Yesterday was my last day at McCord." And yet, even as morale collapsed, the project continued. Driven by government pressure, fear of losing contracts, and the inertia of a state determined to finish what it had started. The hack in December only exposed what insiders already knew. The system was built on fragile foundations. The destruction of McCord's servers left the registry's client portal offline for days. During that time, citizens across multiple regions reported an absence of electronic draft notices, the only brief pause in an otherwise relentless digital expansion. When the site returned, the Ministry of Digital Development assured the public that data integrity was not compromised. But within the leaked files, hackers claimed to have found evidence of deep vulnerabilities, including unencrypted backups containing the personal data of millions of citizens. And so, as the government scrambled to restore control and the press began to uncover the full scope of the breach, one question loomed over everything. What happens when the state builds a system so vast, so invasive, that even its own architects can no longer contain it? This was not just the story of a company hacked. It was the story of a system exposed. One that reveals how the digital future of governance can so easily become an instrument of surveillance, fear, and silent coercion. Before we turn to the consequences of this collapse, to what happened after the hack, to who tried to cover it up, and to how the story rippled through Russia's corridors of power, remember to subscribe and stay with us. Because what follows is not just about lost data. It's about the people who built this system, the secrets they tried to hide, and the profound implications for millions of Russians whose digital lives are now tied to a single, compromised network. Part 3. After the hack, silence fell over McCord's offices. The company's website displayed a generic maintenance page, and its employees were instructed to avoid any public statements. But internally, panic was growing. The infrastructure was gone, the backups were corrupted, and Rostelecom had already blocked their access to joint servers. In the days that followed, fragments of their destroyed systems began circulating online. Pieces of source code, screenshots of private chats, and technical documents showing how deeply McCord had been involved in the military registry's construction. What once existed behind firewalls and passwords was suddenly visible to the world, and the consequences rippled across Russia's digital bureaucracy. Journalists from important stories traced the breach's aftermath through hundreds of leaked messages. The hackers, identifying themselves only by aliases, claimed they had not only erased McCord's infrastructure, but also copied its most sensitive data before doing so. Among the files were development plans, email archives, internal guides for military commissariats, and correspondence with officials at the Ministry of Defense and Ministry of Digital Development. Analysts who reviewed the leaks confirmed their authenticity, noting the precision of timestamps, internal directory structures, and proprietary code snippets that could only have come from the company's internal servers. The story quickly spread beyond Kazan. In Moscow, cybersecurity specialists were called in to assess whether the breach had compromised state systems. The Ministry of Defense insisted that the core of the Unified Register of Military Records, the so-called closed contour, an isolated network physically separated from the Internet, remained intact. But experts who examined McCord's technical documentation said otherwise. The breach may not have reached the database itself, but it exposed the code that connects it to external portals, and those connectors could become backdoors if reused. One independent analyst put it bluntly: "When you know how the locks are built, you don't need the keys." The hackers described the operation as an act of protest, not profit. They said their goal was to expose how Russia was preparing for new waves of mobilization under the guise of digital modernization. In their public statement, they accused McCord of building a system of silent coercion that would allow the government to conscript citizens without direct contact or legal transparency. Within hours of the leak, activists from the project Go Forest received encrypted archives containing the stolen files. They passed them to investigative journalists, who began piecing together the full scope of what McCord and its state partners had created. Inside the documents was the blueprint of a total surveillance apparatus. The system integrated data from dozens of state registries, tax records, property databases, healthcare archives, and migration files. Each citizen's profile contained hundreds of parameters: family details, medical history, education, employment, and travel movements. The architecture allowed authorities to filter citizens by nearly any criteria. Want to locate all men between 30 and 40 who changed residence in the last year? The query took seconds. Want to list all citizens with expired passports or unpaid fines? Another click. In one of the documents labeled Demonstration Scenario, developers described how draft notices could be automatically generated and delivered through Gosuslugi, while travel restrictions were transmitted to the Federal Security Service in real time. The Ministry of Defense's internal presentations, also found in the leaks, revealed the political weight of the project. In May 2025, Deputy Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin and Defense Minister Andrei Belousov personally reviewed the system in the Government Coordination Center near the Moscow River. One slide, titled Mobilization Readiness Indicators, displayed live statistics: the number of draft notices issued, appeals filed, and exemptions granted. Another slide labeled Mobilization Dashboard, General's Interface, showed a map of Russia with interactive layers representing the readiness of regional commissariats. The demonstration, according to messages between government officials, was tense. The system crashed twice, and at one point, the developers were told to remove all reference to automated mobilization before showing it to the president's administration. While officials debated presentation details, the people building the system were collapsing under exhaustion. Internal chat logs show developers joking darkly about living in the bunker and sleeping next to the code. When one of them, Ruslan Gazdinov, complained that he hadn't slept in 3 days, his manager replied, "None of us have. Just finish the dashboard." Another employee, asked about his experience working on the project, simply wrote, "It's dirt." Many wanted to quit, but the company's financial incentives and fear of being blacklisted from other state IT projects kept them in place. The leaks also revealed the moral contradictions of those inside McCord. While some employees privately opposed the war and criticized mobilization, they continued to work on the system that enabled it. Others saw it as just another job. One correspondent showed a developer vacationing in Thailand, asking whether draft notices were still being delivered back home. Another thread captured a conversation about moving to Europe. A senior architect, Aline Sufilina, coordinated development from Vienna, where she lived for several years with her husband, describing the city in interviews as safe, peaceful, and ideal for a family. All the while, she was managing modules for a registry that would one day determine who in Russia was summoned to fight. The revelations shook the Russian tech community. Many had long suspected that companies involved in digital transformation projects were quietly building instruments of surveillance. The McCord hack confirmed it. Within days, discussions erupted in closed Telegram channels among IT professionals, debating whether to continue working on state contracts. Some argued that refusing would change nothing. Others insisted that complicity was no longer defensible. One anonymous developer wrote, "You can't hide behind code. Every line you write for them is a line that writes someone's fate." Meanwhile, inside government ministries, damage control began. Officials downplayed the incident, calling it a temporary technical disruption. But documents showed that the investigation reached the highest levels. Rostelecom executives demanded audits from all subcontractors, while the Federal Security Service conducted interviews with McCord's remaining staff. A report prepared by the Ministry of Digital Development concluded that human error and insufficient security discipline were to blame. Yet no one was formally charged. McCord's director, Ramil Gabdurakhmanov, gave a brief comment to journalists, saying only, "This happens to many. Cyberattacks are part of modern life." He did not mention that the attack had destroyed nearly everything his company had built. Beyond the immediate chaos, the breach raised a deeper question about the future of digital governance in Russia. The Unified Register of Military Records was not an isolated project. It was part of a broader movement toward what officials called the seamless state. The idea was to link all citizen data into a single ecosystem, enabling instant decisions about benefits, taxes, or military duties. But as the McCord hack demonstrated, such centralization also creates single points of failure. One compromised contractor, one stolen password, one outdated firewall, and the entire system can be laid bare. Experts who reviewed the leaked code warned that the registry's design violated basic cybersecurity principles. The most critical was the absence of the principle of minimal sufficiency, the idea that systems should collect only the data necessary for their purpose. Instead, Airvu gathered everything, from biometric identifiers to property records, making it a goldmine for anyone seeking to exploit or sell personal information. "It's not a question of if this data will leak," one analyst said. "It's when." As journalists continued their investigation, they discovered even more troubling details. Among the technical papers was an explanation of the EKS module's anonymization process, a euphemism for deletion. It showed how administrators could upload lists of names and, within minutes, erase all traces of those individuals from the registry. The feature was meant to protect intelligence officers, government officials, and their families, but the mechanism could theoretically remove anyone. The system kept no logs, no audit trails, no proof of who had executed the operation. "It's a perfect tool for impunity," said one expert. "You can make a person disappear from the state's digital memory." In April 2025, before the hack, the module had been demonstrated to government officials, including Yulia Levitskaya. Her instructions were clear. Show the visualization, show the deletion function. The demonstration reportedly went smoothly, and within weeks the component was approved for integration. Now, after the breach, the same module became a symbol of the system's ethical and technical rot, a machine built to erase accountability itself. By late December, McCord's employees were still struggling to restore basic operations. Some worked remotely, others met in cafes, sharing fragments of recovered code. A few joked that they might as well rebuild the company from scratch under a new name. But the reality was grim. Their contracts were suspended, salaries delayed, and most of their servers remained offline. Even if they could restore the data, trust was gone. The Ministry of Defense began searching for alternative developers, and several sources reported that larger state-controlled firms were preparing to absorb McCord's remaining staff. And yet, amid the wreckage, a quiet irony remained. The people who had built a system of total control had themselves lost control, over their data, their infrastructure, and their future. The hackers had given them a taste of their own architecture: exposure, vulnerability, dependence on unseen hands. For the Russian government, the breach was a humiliation. For McCord's employees, it was a reckoning. As the story faded from official channels, its consequences continued to echo. The leaked data became a reference point for digital rights groups warning about the dangers of centralized surveillance. Analysts outside Russia compared the ERVU to similar projects in other authoritarian regimes, noting the global trend toward algorithmic governance. Human rights advocates called it a warning that technology designed for efficiency can easily become an instrument of coercion. In Moscow, officials pushed ahead regardless, insisting that the registry would resume full operation soon. Safer, faster, and more secure than before. But the truth is harder to rebuild than servers. Once a system like this exists, once the code is written and the data collected, it can be used for anything. Today for draft notices, tomorrow for tracking dissent. The McCord hack exposed not only technical flaws, but a deeper truth about modern power: that the more completely a government seeks to control its citizens through data, the more fragile that control becomes. And so, as we look back at this story, from the bar in Kazan to the bunker in Moscow, from the erased servers to the millions of records still humming in secret databases, one conclusion is impossible to avoid. The digital state that promised order has revealed chaos. The system built to protect the powerful has endangered everyone else. The hack did not merely destroy a company. It pulled back the curtain on the architecture of control itself, showing the world how easily it can be built and how easily it can fall. If you value independent investigations like this one, subscribe and stay with us. The deeper we look into the machinery of power, the clearer it becomes that transparency is not just a principle, it is protection. The next investigation is already underway. And as always, every subscription, every comment, every share